much as he can to have people go after what he wants them to go after in retarding them in the name of Jesus. So he moved right in there. Now don't misunderstand that Jesus was a member of the next level. But after Jesus' departure, here became a great opportunity to step in and take his place. Did you all ever read any of the little book of Adam and Eve? Don't you remember how Satan appeared as the Lord many times and was so convincing that Adam was totally confused and totally trusted him? And the naivete and the ignorance of the plants on the garden, they don't know not to trust him when he comes to them in spiritual ways and in ways that seem to be godly, because they are mimicking the ways that were godly ways generations ago, but are not timely now. But the way he can hold them back is to have them think that's the way they should be acting now.
I read an article in the Sunday paper today, which I thought was a good thing, and wanted to see if it was, and that this situation in Londonderry between the Catholics and the Protestants and the community over there. There's a community in Louisiana that I guess is sponsored by some people with connection with the Irish conflict. Anyway, it brings teenagers and young kids over here, Irish family teenagers and Protestant family teenagers, and sends them on all kinds of outings and picnics and things. And then they get to know each other and like each other, and then they send them back to London. And then they're like a good influence in the community. And really,
where did you see this?
This was in today's paper. And it seemed like a really neat solution. Like that whole
That sounds good.
This morning on this, they had a segment on the CBS Sunday Morning News about these children that are without homes, and they're teenagers, and they were trying to get them some families to adopt them. And instead of programming those children, they all look sad. You know,
they've been so programmed to believe that what they really need is a mommy and daddy to love them. And they've been...
Be a family.
Right.
But this is an opportunity to make them happy because they're in a circumstance like this. But it's only because they're preaching to them that they need a mommy and a daddy.
Now, I don't know. I want to say what he's saying again, because what you really need to, like, for example, there was I think it was a monastery or some a priest who had on a monk's robe and so. At any rate, they were taking these in and trying to find these teenagers in and trying to find them families. And what we saw was the opportunity for them to be their family. And that the best thing would have been for them to never have a family, but to grow strong and healthy and happy under those circumstances, rather than, because some of these poor children had been tossed to, I don't know if you know it, but ignorant, many times, innocently ignorant husband and wife think if they could just have a child, it'll solve all their problems. And so, and if they can't have children, then they go out and adopt one. And all it does is end up quadrupling their problems. So they find the child to be undesirable. Well, it wasn't the child at all. It was that the mother and father didn't know how to get along, and the child didn't heal all the wounds. So they abort send the child back. And the next thing you know, the child's been bounced around to 8 or 10 different foster families. And they've been programmed that they must have been a failure, because they wouldn't have been bounced around had they really found love in those families. So they've so been programmed to believe, if only I could find mommy and a daddy that really loved me in the right way, which they didn't have to do that. I mean, they didn't have to be put in that self-abusive condition. They could have been taught, look, You don't need that circumstance. You don't trust it. We could send you out here to Mr. and Miss Jones, but your life might be miserable after the newness wears off. And you can grow to be anything you want to grow to be right here. You see what we're saying? These institutions would have done better if they had raised them right there, instead of trying to shove them out in family units that weren't prepared to handle it.
It showed one teenage boy who looked like he must have been 16, and a very mature 16-year-old boy. In other words, he looked a lot older than me.
He'd been through so much.
And he was sitting with an overweight, very unattractive female vehicle.
And the male, too.
And they were sitting holding hands. Now, I felt like that boy was more to her than a son. It was giving her something she couldn't get in
That's
the world.
right. That's right.
You know what I'm saying? It was a sick circumstance.
Very sick.
It looked sick, and what will that do to that boy? Not knowing what a family is, thinking this is what a family is.
And they're showering on him the most unhealthy type of love. It's not caring, which would be a healthy type of love. They're showering on him affection, which becomes a physical addiction to each other. And they were ignorant. The mother and father were ignorant. They were obese. They were low class, poorly educated. And this child had some, we could see he had some potential, better than that. He could have done better than that. But he was so programmed to look for love that when they came on so strongly with this love, he was quickly just swept right into it and just was gobbling it up like someone would a drug. And it was very, very unhealthy.
He looked more advanced than the parents.
Yes, much more.
And in my mind, if I were him, I would think, is this what a family is? Even because you can get tired of that kind of sickness. I don't mean that you can't be nice to each other and respectful, but to talk about how much you love, all the time, that gets old, especially with kids.
Their whole conversation was sentimentality and emotionalism. That's all it was based on. And we're hoping that the child will recognize that that's too shallow. But even again, then he will, because of his programming, think I've been a failure again. You see? I mean, he could fall into that unless he grows enough to say, this isn't what, I don't need that. That would be good. But he could have found that in that with those monks or with those Jesuits. They could have said, look, you don't need that. We'll set you up right here and teach you how to get out on your own and make a place for yourself.
I read something in the paper about 3 weeks ago. There's an article on the latest slang that the children have, and one caught my eye. I thought was amusing. That in place of the word leave, they're using the word sky. So when they're fixing to leave, they say, "Well, I'm fixing the sky."
What is that? This is new slang. I'm fixing the sky.
Just looking for something to see if they were picking up on anything. I thought that was possible.
Yeah, they could. Poor thing. They don't know.
Well, also thinking of Tim Arthur, there are a couple of things. Another one is there's something really great cosmic.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The Dalai Lama of Tibet has come to Dallas very shortly to speak at a convocation.
But he probably speaks Tibetan, so.
No, he speaks. Yeah.
We sat in on a meeting one time where some Indian teachers came to talk, and
some of the followers of the Divine Life Mission.
I didn't think they were They talked and talked and talked. And
They
there
talked.
were words they were
They
saying.
talked a broken English that was so broken you couldn't make out any of the words.
Mostly Indian.
Yes,
You think that's true?
I think they were trying.
I didn't know that. I thought they were sticking.
It certainly wasn't discernible. Either that or you're right, and I was trying to read it. But it's interesting to us that, or it was interesting to me that the Tibetan big guy, because a lot of these kind of far out Buddhists and so forth think that he's kind of Archbishop of Eastern religions. And for him to come to Dallas to speak, that they created some little square downtown that is dedicated to Thanksgiving to the Creator, and they sent out to all over the world to religious leaders to see if they would want to participate in convocations at that square, which to me was funny because a square is actually a triangle down there. But and he was the first one to respond, to say that he, at first opportunity, he wanted to come and participate in the convocation for Thanksgiving. Because these people are very susceptible to being duped by foreigners. Do you know what we mean by that? And the more foreign they are, the more mysterious they are, the more they get taken up into it, caught up in it.
You're talking about Texas?
Yes.
Anybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, anybody, that's true, but
Not just Texas.
no, not just Texans, but people are really into
That's pretty
being,
cool. Pretty.
just like if you want to really feel like you don't know a thing in the world about food, let a Frenchman tell you what real cooking is all about. And he does it in a way that you feel like you're an ignorant fool and you've never had a decent thing to eat in your life. And yet, the truth is, if you ate what he would have you eat, you would eat the worst thing that there is to be taken from the face of the earth. But doctored up with all kinds of clever sauces.
Wondering if you have any ideas on why you may have made that choice to come here, and because where you get these instructions from, because earlier that they wanted equal time.
Don't know. It's in, but we know that since we are here, that there's a focus of interest here, and we felt like it was even building before we got the instruction to come here. If you can understand that. And we don't know where it's going to lead from here. We're just interested. We're just watching to see what happens.
Lots of Republican convention is going to be here in about a week. And I don't know what else.
The circus? Any of you?
This is kind of silly, but well, last night I had this little dream that I had a pet rabbit, a little phosphorus, and he wanted to go with me wherever I went, but he couldn't come in the house. He kept trying to tell him that he could come in the house. So I tried to maybe figure out a thing where I can understand it, and I was wondering if it's possible if this vehicle wants to go, and this vehicle can't go. You know what I'm saying?
Sounds like you might need some phosphorus.
Wait a minute, you're saying could it be that your vehicle?
Trying to hint that it would like to go with mine, wherever it goes. It wants to go with
Oh,
it.
your vehicle wants to go.
And trying to say, no, it's not possible.
Well, now, I don't know. Your vehicle will probably go with you. And I don't
Have we given you the idea that you're not going to take your vehicle?
Well, there's just, I don't know, it's like, maybe notion that.
Well, I think all of your vehicles, in a sense, are after free transportation wherever you go. I mean, they really are. They all kind of feel like, I want to go where you're going. Can't you feel that? Yes. And,
But it doesn't want to do what it's supposed to do.
They want free. Yes, they don't want paper.
Just let them go whenever the spacecraft comes. And that's the end of it. Well, unfortunately, if that was all that we were supposed to do, we would have been gone a long time ago. Because, in other words, if we didn't have tasks to do, we would have gone. But you have the tasks to do, and we have to complete the tasks. And as soon as it's done, according to the way the next level feels like it's supposed to be done, then I'm sure they will leave.
One thing I want to say, if we're about ready to wind it up, and that's back at the beginning of our talk, we were talking a little bit about the things that you have to deal with your vehicles. And the conversation, the words we were using sounded like also the things that you have to overcome. And don't forget that you don't have to overcome those things. I'm talking to your next level mind, because they are not things of you, but you have to force your vehicle to have those things overcome and under control. Do you understand that? In other words, don't forget that you have been sent here to use these vehicles and their deficiencies as transmitters, and that if you effectively do with these vehicles what you have been instructed to do with them in controlling them in all of their less than forward motion ways, that you will have done your task. And the more thoroughly you do that transmission, the better task you're doing. And that's a constant job. Okay? You want to shut it off?
In other words, it is when we feel like it's so black that we can't see the light, the next level comes to us. And we come to you when you need help. Now, when we are not available and you need help, then the next level feels like you don't need us. Otherwise, we would come.
Now, do you
You
understand
understand
that?
that? They know that you can get out of it.
They feel like
on
you
your
can
own.
make it through that period and do your own work in bringing you up to suffer what you need to do. In other words, you're not going to fall from it. You're not going to hurt from it.
You are
If you
not
do
in
your work,
trouble.
you're not in trouble by the next level standard. If you get in trouble, it's because you chose to accept the trouble.
Now, there are lots of things that happen in the world. Many times in the past, like gasoline shortages, and wondering if we would have enough gasoline to get around and do all that we had to do, and different crises that were threatening at that time. And I know I kept thinking, well, maybe now the next level will come after us. And then the answer would be, you're not threatened. We're not threatened, so why complete the task? Why stop the task when it hasn't been completed? And that's the way the next level works. When you need help badly, you can bank on help coming to you. But if you don't get help, just try to analyze it and think, well, the next level must know that I can handle it on my own. And therefore, they do not send help. Whenever Link leaves you, we never leave you because you are driving us crazy.
Speak for yourself.
Okay? In other words, don't joking. We leave because we have work to do. And so don't ever feel like you are driving us crazy, or you're doing something that Lynx can't stand, and so they have left you in order to get stronger and then come back and face it again. It isn't that way at all. Julie?
I have difficulty trying to understand the thoughts that we're sending out, like we went through this and that humans were supposed to overcome through one of the pieces, greed and whatnot. And I might be like to keep busy during the day and do all the tasks, and I'm wondering, but we're supposed to keep these other things on our mind all the time, and I'm wondering if I'm shorting one task to do the other.
Okay, let me interrupt you. Okay, I know what you think. I will repeat, and it's on tape. Okay, a couple of tapes back, but I'll repeat it again. When you are doing everything during the day that you are faced with to do, not because you want to do them, but they're still there for you to do, right? The way you handle those tasks, you are sending, if you handle them in the way a member of the next level would handle them, you're sending out what you're supposed to be sending out at that time. Now, if you are faced with a circumstance of conflict with somebody, how you handle that conflict, if you handle it the way a member of the next level would handle it, then you're sending out into the ether exactly what you're supposed to send out.
Actually, a lot stronger signal than if you were sitting somewhere thinking about sending out thoughts.
You can't sit down and think everybody has to be nice to each other. Everybody has to say the right words.
It's by your practice. It's by the actual, what you do in a circumstance that causes you to send out a signal. When you're threatened with something, now, the things that happen in silence is when you're threatened with a thought, how do you abort it? Now but it's the action. But if you're saying, well, I'm going to go sit down and think about these things that I'm going to send to humans, that's all diluted and almost worthless.
It's false. It's worthless. It's how you handle a circumstance. That's why it disturbs us if we find out that this practice is not pleasant.
Yes,
because of how you all get along with each other. If somebody is coming back with remarks that changes the vibration in the class,
you're sending that out.
You're sending it out.
Stronger than anything you could go sit down in meditation and send out.
It's going out like a radio wave. And this is how you do it. Okay? Do y'all remember hearing that okay? And believe it or not, it works. And but every circumstance, I'll repeat it again, every circumstance that you're faced with, the ones who have an out-of-craft task, the ones who are in the craft, the way you handle every circumstance that you're faced with determines what goes out into the ether by you. If you send a negative response out, then that negative response becomes stronger, and you're going to have to do more work to get it eradicated. You're defeating your purpose. And this is why I can't understand why some of you like to work so hard. I don't like to work that hard in that way. I would rather have a nice response.
I hope you're understanding what T is saying.
I would rather have a nice response. And that way I don't have to work so hard. I have time for other things.
In other words, okay, so she's saying that why have a poor response and then have to work so hard to make up for it before you get to a good response, when if you'd had the right response in the beginning, you could go on about your next thing. In other words, it's a lot of wasted labor and effort any time that you send out a rotten signal, because you have to do overtime and overtime and overtime to catch up for that rotten signal.
Plus the fact, the strain that you're attached to is you're putting in bad genes in your body.
That's right.
And you don't want to do that. At least I don't think you would. I don't want to put any in mine. And if you don't feel good genes, then we don't feel like you would be sitting here at this time. so what you want to do is do imaging, do whatever it takes to have a good response. And first you have to be aware of the fact that this experience is happening to me right now because I need to send out good thoughts to the ones that are connected to me. Meaning you want to have a good response and you want to be aware of it so you can stop and think, this Nairobi's coming on to me right now and I want to handle this in the right way. And then if I handle it in the right way, then Nairobi will handle it in the right way.
Or stands a better chance.
Or stands a better chance. If she chooses not to, then she just has to work overtime.
Okay. You know, there's something that really confuses me in your ignorance because you don't realize that you're ignorant in this way. You still live thinking that that this is unconscious thinking. So I don't know if you call it thinking, but unconsciously you still think that there are individuals, let's say, even out there in that world, that could be a better friend to you than some of your classmates. And that is a lie. That is a lie. And you're ignorant by thinking this. There's not one of you sitting here or one that will listen to this tape that is not here that could go out and find a person on the face of the globe that could be as good a friend to them as what they would consider the worst friend of their class. And you better wake up to that because you abuse your class members when you are ugly to them and when you let poor responses come out. And they are jewels to you and you don't recognize it. You think sometimes your vehicles even would have you think, I get tired of the same old faces, the same 35 all the time. I don't ever see any fresh faces. If you, I couldn't put you anywhere out there with any individual that in 30 minutes you wouldn't crave to be with the worst one of your class. And you would be breathing a sigh of relief to be back with that worst one. And so, not that you should think of any of them as worst ones, but you still let your vehicle think that way. So you ought to bring your vehicle up to date and appreciate your class members better. And because if you did, you wouldn't ever let your vehicle treat them the way you let them treat them sometimes. Okay? Yeah.
What you said made me after I thought of me today.
The humans, their minds aren't nearly as strong as ours, but invariably when I finally go into a new out-of-class situation, the thoughts and their habits, I can't believe the influence they have on this vehicle. Things that this vehicle wouldn't think to do, you suddenly have to fight off against it. What's causing that? I don't understand. Well, like it is laziness or it's putting things off, procrastinating, things that you see them do a lot of that you don't do. Well, I think because, the only thing that I can say, and see, I want to know what she has to say about it, but from what you're telling me, I would say that you were sent to that task because you needed to send stronger signals in those areas. In other words, if you're confronted with weaknesses of that vehicle that can easily be calmed by humans who still easily practice procrastination or whatever those elements are, then that's an opportunity for you to strengthen and to send out stronger signals by not giving in to those things. That's the only thing I can think. Because to me, I would look at it as an opportunity, as an advantage. And but I would put my seek and search out to see if I am weakening at all in some of the characteristics genetic characteristics of my vehicle to be influenced. None of you should be influenced or influenceable by human ways that would differ from next level ways. And therefore, I think you're thrown into situations with humans to test that, only to strengthen you and to make you recognize how you can still easily be conned by someone who seemingly comes on very strong and comes on so quick that you just feel like to cross them or buck them in any way would just upset things so that they wouldn't know how to deal with it.
Well, I also wonder if sometimes I feel like a good portion of my mind is gone. It's like, I'm here, or otherwise it wouldn't be so difficult.
Well,
and other times it's so simple.
Well, I can't help but when you're saying this, remember an earlier discussion we had about familiarity that you have had with people that you're tasked. Because to us, when you go out on an out-of-craft task, you have to, with extreme, careful design, set up a circumstance between yourself and the ones that you're working with on an out-of-craft task to protect yourself. And anytime you become, you let them be a little too familiar with you, or so that they might say anything that they want to say, or expect of you anything that they might expect of someone else, you've destroyed your capacity to really function as a member of this class in that out-of-craft circumstance. Do you follow what we're saying? And all of you who've had out-of-craft tasks, and even those of you who haven't, you ought to imagine how difficult it is and how carefully you have to go into that situation. And I'm sure that if you go in properly, they're going to wonder about you a little bit because you're a little different and you're not falling into their game. You're not falling into their conversation, and they're not taking you into their fold. And you can't let them take you in. If you let them take you in, then you try to get out. You always make a mess of it. So you have to not let them take you in. But believe it or not, you can very successfully work in an out-of-craft task without ever being taken in, and remaining your separate self, and letting them know that you function very well at what the job requires of you. Show them. You don't tell them, you show them. And pretty soon they find that you're the best person they could have possibly had for the task. But you can't involve yourself in a lot of conversation with them. You can't involve yourself with even much humor with them or loose talk or anything, because then they start to encompass you in a way that you would have to then make it seem extremely strange to try to wiggle out.
And also I noticed that, like now, I feel like that there's a progression. When you first come in, it's very difficult, it seems like. And that was part of my question, because whereas now, the same elements that seemed so hard to work against before were much easier. It's like you set up a vibration. But I wonder, that it makes me wonder, though, what was it that made it so hard to begin with? Why was it so hard when you first started? It's like, what did they set up in there that you walk into?
Well, you walk into a nest. Haven't we told you how every thought that you deposit around here is polluting the air if it's less than a good thought, and others can pick up on it? Now, when you walk into an out-of-craft task, humans are just as capable of depositing all of their thoughts around, and so you've got to know what you're walking into, and you've got to have a tremendously strong guard against those things, and yet do it in a way that it doesn't look strange to them, the kind of guard that you have.
If you feel like it's, in a sense, this is why we say when you go to look for a task, see what it feels like to you. If it feels compatible, then you don't have too much to work on. But if your task becomes one that makes you feel like it's too difficult to stay where you're supposed to stay, then that isn't the task for you.
Like we pulled some out of some tasks because we felt like the vibrations that surrounded them were just more than they needed to try to battle against. And we didn't pull them out because we felt like they were not successful at battling against them. We felt like they didn't need it. They didn't need to work that hard against those vibrations. For example, some of them, I think, like at Kerbal, working at Holiday Inn and Lounge and things like that, with all that music and that loud and drunks and loose mouths and everything, and just there was no need for that. Now we know that no damage happened. That the experience was probably a strengthening little period. But we wouldn't, if we become aware of a circumstance that you're in that is pulling you down, and you can't objectively see how not to let it pull you down and keep you where you need to stay, then you've got to let us help you. And either we'll help you get that one in control, or we'll help you find another. It's that simple. But they're all going to be a test for you. There's not a task out there that would be easy. There's not a task out there that you could go in as smoothly as you can exist here in this craft. What throws us sometimes is some of you can exist more smoothly out there than you can in here. Which means that you are really taking for granted the people in here. And you're letting your vehicle do things out there that it can't get away with in here. Like, let's say that if you can succeed at a task out there and have more harmony in it, it's probably because the people around you are accepting you letting your vehicle do its thing. You know, like you can talk more freely, you can say what you do, and nobody's reminding you of procedure. Or saying, did you read the book? Or, you know, or you're not uncomfortable when your mouth slips. So anytime someone's more comfortable out there than they are here, it's because they are in the wrong place when they're out there. I'm not talking about the wrong job. I'm talking about they're vibrating in the wrong place. They are not living as members of the next level out there play acting a task. Instead, they have found that an opportunity to let their vehicles do what their vehicles want to do. And then they come back here, and it's harder to get along because the vehicle can't do what the vehicles want to do. You see what we're saying?
It's easier to say the thing that's so nice when you first brought up about how you couldn't find a friend out there. I think that's what triggered this whole thought, because I realized that when I come back to the craft, that's when it's so much easier. It's like you don't have to worry. Everything's much easier to push through because there's nothing to push through.
That's right. Well, the things that, you know, you all take little bitty things here and make mountains out of them. And they become traumatic, just, you know, a matter of life and death, mountains out of nothing. And yet you go out there and those things can happen by the dozens in front of you and you expect them to happen, so it doesn't matter. But if they happen here, you're ready to crucify each other. And that's as it should be, because you shouldn't get away with it. Because not who you are. Not who you are.
It's rather quit. It's not very important.
We'd rather quit, but go ahead. No! Go ahead.
Thinking about the things that were presented with, like even how I felt the difficulty in dealing with what I noticed yesterday, and I could only think of presenting it to you. And I was thinking, well, I've had one thing that I thought about, that we talked about, was punishment system and attitude towards particular people, you know, who might not follow the rules exactly. I thought, well, if these kind of situations don't still arise, then we don't have such good opportunities to send out help in the world. And is that one way to try and look at how things happen among us here?
Not sure I followed. Did you follow that?
If, let's say I'm trying to not see anybody break procedure or doing anything wrong, but I catch myself where it happens. And then right away I have to not let my vehicle feel any response.
Right.
have an understanding that, there's a reason for that, but maybe I can't come up with a reason, but I think, well, if we didn't have a vehicle that had genes in that way, I wouldn't have a chance to send it out to the world that I want to take
Well, that's true. That's true. And everything it's all in how you look at it. Because the difficulties that you have to deal with your vehicles, you should stop taking personally. You should merely take as the tools that you have for sending out signals. So every time you come upon a circumstance that challenges that poor response or that vehicular's immature way or less than good way, is an opportunity for you to send out a signal. Now, at the moment, if the vehicle's pretty strong and the mind's not in too strong, the vehicle is affected in a personal way. But if the mind comes in, the mind can take that personal out of it. You see what we're saying? And say to yourself, okay, here's a chance for me to send a nice transmission.